Hey folks, this is Nick from First Coast Math Clinic. In this video, we're going to get into how to factor perfect square trinomials. We're going to go through what a perfect square trinomial looks like, what it is. We're going to look at these 5 examples, figure out which of these are perfect square trinomials, and then once we identify perfect square trinomials from these examples, we're going to factor them into binomials. I'm going to reference a previous video I made on squaring binomials, so I'll put that in as well. Before we get into this, make sure that you've liked and subscribed and leave a comment for any topics you'd like to see videos made on. All right, let's get into it. So our perfect square trinomials take one of two forms. It's either going to be a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, or a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. Now these forms may look familiar. These are the forms that we get when we square a binomial. I made a video on how to square a binomial. The link is coming up right about now. But let's review that. Let's review squaring a binomial, because when we square a binomial, we're going to get a perfect square trinomial. So let's look at this example. Let's say we've got x minus 3 squared. So that's going to be our binomial. So this binomial is in the form a minus b squared. So a is x and b is 3. Well, how do we square this? We know that from our rules, when we square a binomial, we want to square the first term. So this is going to be x squared, or a squared. We're going to square the last term. So this is going to be b squared, or 3 squared. And the last term is positive and positive. And to get the middle term, we want 2ab, and we're going to keep whatever sign we have here. So this is going to be minus 2ab. So minus 2 times x times 3. Now when I simplify this, this is going to be equals x squared minus 6x plus 9. So this is our perfect square trinomial, because we got it when we squared x minus 3. And if we think about this, our general form right here, a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, well, that's the same thing that we have here. And we got that by squaring a minus b squared. So our perfect square trinomial, a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, when we factor that, we're going to factor that into a binomial, a minus b squared. So all we have to do is figure out, well, what's a, what's b, and then write it in this form, a minus b squared. Now let's say we've got plus, so let's do maybe like 2y plus 5 squared. Well, how are we going to square that? We know our rule for squaring a binomial. We want to square the first term, so square the 2y. That's our a squared. We want to square the last term, square 5. That's going to be 5 plus, and that's b squared. And the middle term is going to be 2ab, and we're going to keep the sign, so that's plus, and this is a plus b squared. So 2 times a times b, 2 times 2y times 5. So when we simplify this, we're going to get 4y squared plus 20y plus 25. So this is another perfect square trinomial that we got from squaring this binomial. And again, here we have our general form, a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, which is the same thing that we have right here. So when we factor our perfect square trinomial, we want to get a binomial out of it. All we have to do is identify a and b. If it's plus, we're going to be adding, and we want a plus b squared. All right, so that's all we're going to do. The biggest thing we have to do is first figure out, what do we have a perfect square trinomial? So to do that, we've got to identify a couple criteria. Well, let's look at our perfect square trinomials here, right? Let's look at the first terms and last terms. First terms and last terms are both positive and perfect squares. Okay, so our first check, first and last terms are perfect squares. and positive. So that's our first check. Second check is, let's look at that middle term, right? So we have 6x and 20y. Well, how do we get that? What's our check for that? Well, what we can do is we know that these terms are we're going to get this term by taking 2 times a times b and 2 times a times b. So that's our check for the middle term. So the middle term is 2 times a times b. If both of these criteria are met, first and last terms are perfect squares and positive, and the middle term is 2 times a times b, then we have a perfect square trinomial. We can identify our a and b value and rewrite our perfect square trinomial as either a plus b squared or a minus b squared, depending on this sign. Okay? All right, let's get into a couple examples where we factor our perfect square trinomial. Identify if our trinomial is a perfect square, and then do some factoring. All right, so for number one, we've got x squared minus 4x plus 4. First thing we want to do is figure out, is this a perfect square trinomial? So we know that this is going to be in the form, actually not x, let's do a. So it should be a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. I'm using minus because we have a minus sign here. All right, so this is the form, if it is a perfect square trinomial, that it should be in, that this should be in, and our binomial then is going to be a minus b squared. Okay, so that's going to be the binomial answer that we're going to get. So let's first see, is this a perfect square trinomial? So what are we squaring to get x squared? Well, we're squaring x, and what are we squaring to get 4? We're squaring 2. And both the first and last terms are positive. All right, so that first condition checks. First and last terms are perfect squares, and they're positive. Now the middle term has to be 2 times a times b. So if I substitute our values in, 2 times a, which is x, times b, which is 2, 2 times x times 2 gives us 4x. So that part checks. And again, this is minus, so we can just bring down, just fill in with the minus and the minus, right? So that second part checks. This middle term is equal to 2 times a times b. So this is a perfect square trinomial. So we've done our checks. We've identified that this is a perfect square trinomial. It's in this form. Okay? We know that a is equal to x, b is equal to 2. So we can write our answer in our form a minus b squared. And our answer is going to be x minus 2 squared. Now, just as a check, so hopefully this makes a little bit more sense, let's take that x minus 2 squared. We know x minus 2 squared is just x minus 2 times x minus 2. And if we decide to maybe FOIL this, to multiply this out, we should get back this original trinomial, right? So first, x times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And then negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. When we combine these middle terms, we get x squared minus 4x plus 4, which matches that original trinomial that we had, right? So our answer checks. So our factored answer here is going to be x minus 2 squared. All right, let's get into our second example. So example 2, we've got 4y squared minus 2y plus 1. Let's first figure out, is this a perfect square trinomial? So What are we squaring here to get 4y squared? We're squaring 2y. What are we squaring to get 1? We're squaring 1, all right? Both of these are positive, so that checks. This is going to be plus, so this middle term should be 2ab. So 2 times 2y times 1, and this is minus, so we just fill in with a minus and minus. Now some of you guys are looking at this already and saying, all right, well, we should get back 2y here. I've got 2 times 2y times 1. We know 2 times 2y times 1 is going to give us 4y, which is not equal to 2y. All right. So because of that, because these two terms are not equal, 2 times a times b does not give us back that middle term. This is not a perfect square trinomial. All right, so we're not going to be able to factor this one. So we're going to move on to number 3. For number 3, let's figure out what are we squaring to get our first term. So this is x squared. What are we squaring to get our last term? To get 1/4, we're squaring 1/2. So both of those are positive. They're perfect squares, so that checks. The middle term, we know the last term is always plus and plus. The middle term should be 2 times a times b, and this is minus. So if we have 2, well, I'll do that in a second. Let me just finish this middle part, actually. So 2ab should be 2 times a, which is x, times b, which is 1/2. So now if we multiply this out, 2 times x times 1/2 is going to give us 1x, which matches our middle term, right? So 2 times a times b gives us our middle term. So our two checks, check of the outer two terms, first and last, and the check of the middle term, checked. So this is a perfect square trinomial. We know that a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, well, that's going to be a minus b squared. We know a is x, b is 1/2. So our factored binomial is going to be x minus 1/2 squared, and this is going to be our answer. All right, let's look at example number 4. So for number 4, we've got x squared plus 6x minus 9. So again, let's see, is this a perfect square trinomial? We've got a squared, b squared. What are we squaring to get x squared? We're squaring x. What are we squaring to get 9? We're squaring 3. But there's something else we want to point out here, right? Let's look at this. That's a minus 9. Our first and last terms have to be perfect squares, and they also have to be positive. Because this is minus 9, this is not going to be a perfect square trinomial. Since this is subtraction, this is minus 9. This is not a perfect square trinomial, and we're not going to be able to factor this. So number 4 is not a perfect square trinomial. Again, because we're subtracting, that last term is subtraction, it's minus, it has to be plus. Let's move on to number 5. Let's see, is this a perfect square trinomial? What are we squaring? Get rid of that. What are we squaring to get 9z squared, where we're squaring 3z? What are we squaring to get 16? We're squaring 4. And that middle term, this is plus, so it should be plus 2ab, which should equal, our binomial is going to be a plus b squared. If this is a perfect square trinomial, well, this is plus 2 times a, which is 3z, times b, which is 4. Now if we multiply these terms, 2 times 3 times 4 gives us 6 times 4, which is 24z. So this checks. 2 times a times b gives us back that middle term, right? So this is a perfect square trinomial. We identified A as 3z. We identified B as 4. So we can put 3z in for A. We can put 4 in for B. And our answer here is going to be 3z plus 4 squared. Okay? All right, so this video was on how to factor perfect square trinomials, how to identify and how to factor perfect square trinomials. Hope this video helped you guys understand that concept a little bit better. If you like this video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you guys are subscribed. Leave the comments on any topics you would like to see videos made on. And again, I hope these videos are helping you guys. This is Nick from First Coast Math Clinic.